The face everyone knew. The truth no one did. She once stood on the grandest stages in the world, golden statue in hand, the applause of millions washing over her like a tidal wave of adoration. Glenda Jackson, fierce, brilliant, unforgettable, wasn't just a star. She was a force of nature, commanding both screen and stage with a presence that left critics breathless. But then, she vanished. No scandal, no final film, no emotional farewell to the audience that adored her. Just silence. And when the cameras finally found her again, it wasn't in Hollywood or London's West End, it was in the chambers of British Parliament, where she had spent over 2 decades as a politician, refusing interviews, rejecting roles, declaring almost coldly that her acting career was dead. So what made this legendary actress, a 2-time Oscar winner, walk away at the peak of her fame to enter a world where applause meant nothing? And what did she find in the shadows, away from the lights that once defined her? Born in the industrial town of Birkenhead, Glenda Jackson's beginnings were modest, the daughter of a bricklayer and a housemaid. But ambition burned brighter than circumstance. By the 1960s, she had emerged as one of Britain's most magnetic screen presences, defying beauty norms and breaking the mold of what a leading lady could be. Her rise was meteoric. Women in Love, 1969, earned her the first Academy Award, raw, uncompromising, unforgettable. A few years later, A Touch of Class brought her a second Oscar, this time for a performance laced with wit and quiet power. On stage, she transformed Shakespearean roles into moments of thunder. On screen, she was unshakable, a woman who didn't just play parts but swallowed them whole. She wasn't just famous, she was respected. A household name who had crossed the Atlantic without losing her roots or her fire. And yet, while the world celebrated her brilliance, something beneath that polished surface was quietly shifting. Because behind the fame, something was slowly breaking. Glenda Mae Jackson wasn't born into glamour. She grew up in a working-class household where ambition wasn't encouraged, it was survival that mattered. But something within her longed to speak louder than circumstance. As a child, she found refuge in books and storytelling, where voices weren't silenced and women could be more than what the world expected. At 16, she left school and worked at a chemist. Her path to acting was accidental or perhaps inevitable. She joined a local amateur theater group simply to escape the dullness of daily life. But even in those humble halls, her voice demanded attention. It wasn't beauty that got her noticed, it was fire, rage, precision. She earned a scholarship to RADA, the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, and quickly set herself apart. Her performances were fierce, even confrontational. She didn't fit into Hollywood's idea of a starlet, and that's exactly what made her unforgettable. Her first real breakthrough came not from a glamorous film but from Marat, a chaotic, cerebral stage piece. From there, Women in Love would launch her into another stratosphere. She wasn't trying to be loved, she was trying to be true. And audiences unexpectedly responded with awe. She had become someone, not because she followed the rules, but because she broke them. Fame, for Glenda Jackson, was never the destination, it was a side effect. She wore it uncomfortably, like an ill-fitting costume that refused to come off. While others chased the limelight, she questioned why it mattered at all. The roles she played often mirrored her own defiance, women who didn't bend, didn't apologize, didn't smile unless they meant it. But off-screen, the cost of that intensity took its toll. Her marriage quietly ended. Her personal life was kept sealed off from the world, fiercely private, almost guarded. There were no lavish parties, no red carpet headlines about lovers or scandal. Only work. Only purpose. She became known for her refusal to play the game of celebrity. She declined interviews. She dismissed superficiality. She rarely appeared on talk shows. For Glenda, the idea of being a star was hollow. What mattered was truth, and truth, in an industry built on illusion, came at a price. The fame she carried isolated her. It built a pedestal she never asked for. She often spoke about the burden of being watched, judged, commodified. The roles demanded everything. And when the curtain fell each night, she was left alone with the silence fame never filled. It wasn't burnout, it was disillusionment. And quietly, she began imagining a life where the spotlight no longer followed. There was no scandal, no sudden downfall, just a choice, one that stunned the world. In 1992, Glenda Jackson made an announcement that sounded like fiction. She was leaving acting to run for parliament. A two-time Oscar winner, at the height of her intellect and capability, stepping away from the craft that had defined her to become a public servant in a field where applause meant nothing. Hollywood called. She didn't answer. Some thought it was temporary, a bold political detour, but she meant it. She ran for office as a member of parliament with the Labour Party and won. She served not for one term, but 6. For 23 years, she debated, fought, challenged policies, and often stood alone in opposition. She wasn't playing a role anymore. She was building laws, fighting inequality, living a version of truth that didn't need scripts. In those decades, she refused almost every acting offer. She wouldn't attend retrospectives. She once said her Oscars were somewhere in the house, probably covered in dust. When asked about her old career, she simply replied, "That's dead. That's gone." The industry that once praised her moved on. Generations grew up never seeing her perform. Her absence was so complete, it felt like she had vanished into another life, and in many ways she had. For more than 2 decades, Glenda Jackson kept the theater doors shut. While peers aged on-screen or retired into nostalgic tributes, she remained in the House of Commons firm, focused, unflinching. Her life belonged to policy, not performance. But then, in her late 70s, something shifted. In 2016, at the age of 80, she made a return no one had expected. She took on the role of King Lear, not the daughter, not the wife, but the maddened, crumbling patriarch himself. Theaters filled. Critics gasped. Her voice, aged and raw, rang with the weight of both Shakespeare's words and a life deeply lived. It wasn't just a comeback, it was a reckoning. She spoke of the difference between acting and politics. On stage, she said, "You were given a role. In life, you had to live it, and that was far harder." Her body was older, but her presence remained electric. She returned not to reclaim fame, but to remind the world what she had once chosen to leave behind. There would be a few more performances, a final film, The Great Escaper, released shortly before her passing in 2023. Her last years were quiet. No farewell tour, no memoir. Just the final image of a woman who had spent a lifetime stepping in and out of personas and finally standing as herself. Glenda Jackson's name may not echo through celebrity tabloids or glitter on Hollywood's Walk of Fame the way others do, but her legacy lives in places far more enduring. Among actors, she's spoken of in reverent tones, the one who left when she didn't have to, the one who returned only when she had something left to say. To many, she became a symbol not just of talent, but of integrity. She chose conviction over comfort, truth over applause. In politics, she was respected, even feared. Unafraid to speak against her own party, unwilling to compromise her beliefs. She once tore into a sitting prime minister during a tribute speech, a moment that, for some, became more iconic than any film monologue she ever delivered. For audiences, her work has taken on the weight of myth. Because she was absent for so long, every remaining performance feels precious, finite, like a letter from another time. Her characters didn't just entertain, they challenged. They demanded something from the viewer. They stayed with you. Today, her absence is still felt, but so is her standard. Glenda Jackson didn't just leave behind films or speeches. She left behind a question: what does it mean to live fully when the world wants you to play a part? She lived 2 lives and mastered both. Glenda Jackson was never just an actress, nor just a politician. She was a woman who refused to be defined by the roles others offered her. In a world obsessed with fame, she walked away. In a system drowning in ego, she stood up not for herself, but for something greater. And yet, even in her silence, her legacy roared. Her story reminds us that greatness isn't always about staying in the light. Sometimes it's about choosing the dark and making it mean something. How do you remember her? As the actress who commanded the screen? The politician who challenged power? Or the woman who dared to live on her own terms? Tell us in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe if her story moved you.